I think we need to delete the release by a week for the fix for this. I mean,
All right.
there's already like 2 fixes on the way. Like I believe they will land like early next week, so that we can make a call on like how it looks. It's not like far away, very far away. So I would say let's delete the release by a week.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah, I think the fix can land somewhere next week. But like something I would like to say is I think the fix that we have Envoy just for this release is not really resolve the root cause of this kind of like SDS race conditions from that exist there from the beginning. So well that's probably enough for this release, but in next release we probably need a better fix overall for the whole SDS situation because it's caused many churns.
I mean, Lazan, you know how it goes. We have these impartial fixes, and they fix some things, they introduce other issues, and then we just kind of iterate on that. You know, why not just go to a long-term fix right now? How hard would that be?
Yeah, I'm not saying that we should go to long-term fix for 1.8, but
yeah, but I'm saying maybe we should. I'm wondering how long a long-term fix would take.
That will I haven't. So the basic issue is I think the SDS is not complete in the in the warming like init manager flow in that sense. Like it could fall into some situation that SDS is not ready but cluster or listener to be active, and then like it rejects or doesn't connect to stuff. That's one thing, and the another thing is for this one, like we don't have the for the UDS SDS, we don't have the like proper retry or timeout for Envoy to retry on that. So that's two things.
And are they both like, what is the blast radius in those changes? Are they both kind of sweeping changes? Well, the first one sounds like it might be a sweeping change where you need a design doc and everything, and it would take time. I'm not sure about the second. What do you think?
I think both would need some time.
Okay.
Yeah, it could land in 1.9, but I don't think we can do that in 1.8. Yeah.
All right. Okay.
A second question, right? So we have a fix, I guess, in the pipeline. That's fine. Do we have a safety net, right? Like we have an agent and we have an Envoy that's not doing what it's supposed to be doing. Is there any way for the agent to help recover from these situations, even if it's
good question,
pod suicide?
Yeah, great question.
I think we could add a liveness rope that would kill itself. But the issue is, one of the issues is we would need to get the bug of the clusters not warming rather than the bug with the secrets not setting up. Because if the secrets don't set up, then it will be marked ready. And so then you'll actually have major traffic impact. The cluster not getting ready one is a much better bug because it will never be marked ready, so traffic will never be sent there. So it's less impact on the user. Like neither of them are good, but the cluster one is the better one because it's more broken, and so it doesn't even be marked as ready.
And how would we detect that situation externally outside the Envoy process?
So we have I think the entire readiness probe will fail because it's not even listening on the readiness port. And so if we added a liveness port for the same thing, it would also fail. Like we'd basically add a liveness probe that's the same as the readiness probe. So if it doesn't become ready in like a minute or 2 minutes, then it fails.
Okay. I think we should consider having that at least be a fallback plan for getting the release in it.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, we might want in general too. There was some reasons we didn't do it, which was a fear of false positives, but we've mostly made those fears go away, I think, from other things. So it may just be a good idea in general. That the liveness probe, that is.
Right.
So I guess I don't understand what the benefit of having a liveness and a readiness probe. That's the same test. It's kind of redundant.
So I think one would be like the liveness probe has a longer timeout. So if it's
Okay.
not ready for like 2 minutes or something, then we kill it. But the readiness probe, like immediately when it's ready, which could be hopefully like 2 seconds, then it will be marked ready. It's from what I've seen, it's not that uncommon to have them be the same check, but just different intervals and
Yeah, as long if they're yeah. So that's the difference there that I didn't catch earlier. If they're different intervals, that makes sense. As long as that liveness or that readiness probe or the liveness probe, which is using the readiness test, is not checking external dependencies, because then you'll run into other problems.
yeah, it's pretty minimal now. We used to check like the Envoy stats, which would get overloaded sometimes by things that didn't cause the pod to actually fail. So that's why I was always hesitant to add this. But now we're just going through like the real traffic path. So I wouldn't be concerned about adding that.
Okay.
So do we have an issue tracking doing that, John? Or
Maybe. If not, I'll create one.
okay, can I assign you this?
Yeah.
So what did we decide for the short term and the long
Thank you.
term fix?
Yeah.
Sorry, this
No,
digress now.
yes, no, it's huge.
Are we making a tactical fix and releasing, or are we making a long term fix?
I think Lizanne was pretty clear that the long-term fix
Right.
is indeterminate in time.
Yeah, it sounded like a stretch for 1.9, so we can't hold back
Okay.
1.8 for that.
Makes sense.
Yeah, it couldn't be in 1.8.
No,
What
that's
about
fair.
the short-term fix? Is there anything that we should do to accelerate that, or just make sure you have enough coffee? Or
Yeah, it's probably just my coffee.
Oh, Lazan's on the case. I feel much better. That's good. All right. So let's give Lazan some coffee. And then I got diverted. The health check, kind of detect and destroy the scenario that Louis was describing. Do we want to explore that in parallel?
yeah, I think we should do that. But I would still be pretty concerned if that's like if we ship it and we just slap the Band-Aid on, it's still going to be.
No, we're talking about both, John.
Yeah.
Both. Yeah.
Oh. Yeah, as a fallback mechanism, sounds great. But
Okay. Go ahead.
Do we really want to do this in the 1.8 time frame? I'm worried we'll break more things just by introducing new concepts.
If the health check and check and destroy thing has got false positives, we're in trouble.
Oh,
There's
yeah.
risk there.
Just to be clear, the check and destroy thing should be an opt-in feature.
I see. Okay, yeah, actually, I like that. So for people that are reporting the issue, we can give them a break glass. Yeah, that's a good approach. So who's working on that? Who wants to work on that? Is that you, John, or is that somebody else?
yeah, you can assign to me, and I make
Okay.
it. But
I think you'll handle it well. Thank you.
Okay, so we're saying okay to delay pick up Envoy fixes, and possibly readiness compensation optionally. Does that sound right? Delay release. Well. Sound about right to everybody?
Does this cover both the issues, or have we just talked about one of them?
We need to find the owner for the second issue as well. I think it might be a different issue. So it's about aggregate cluster. Like just reported yesterday. So we want to have a root cause or an owner for it yet.
Right. Well, let me indent that then. Right.
I was just going to do the same thing. Thanks.
Mm. want me to present the second one?
Yes. So we saw also an Envoy crash, and I think it's like Pewter also noticed this in the upstream Envoy PR test. So it could be new. Like the reporter said, they cannot reproduce this 1.17, so it's a regression. I would also mark this as a release blocker, and we also need an owner to investigate this.
And this occurs with Envoy filter only because...
Yeah, it's aggregate cluster, so Envoy filter only.
Have we verified that, or we are going just by that issue saying we have to create our own Envoy filter to trigger it?
Good question.
We never send aggregate cluster config through pilot, so
but
if
we
this
have
is a crash in Envoy filter config that's completely custom. That seems like it's not the highest. I mean, maybe it's a release blocker, but it's not as bad as other things.
But we have actually told some of our users to use this, to use Envoy filter to configure aggregate cluster. I think we had a discussion once back when we had Shriram as one of the networking work group leads, where we basically said, before we create a first-class API for aggregate cluster, we should just let them try it via Envoy filter and then formalize it later.
But Josh, that still puts this in the development category, not even the alpha or beta category, right?
So, okay, fair enough. Not a release blocker, but who's working on fixing this?
I would caveat it as a known issue in my release notes, though.
Yeah, I agree, but we should get somebody fixing on it too. Like, can this be a P0 but not a release blocker?
I don't think it's even a P0.
Okay. Knowing who I know uses this, we'll have to get this fixed. I'll take that up offline.
Yeah, I mean, clearly, like any fix is probably okay to go into a patch release, right? I think that much is clear.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And there's no reason not to fix it, right? It's just a question of priority and does it block. Other TOC members? I would be inclined, personally, I think I agree with Niraj.
By the way, release managers.
This is a very uncommon scenario, and I would imagine it's only with aggregate clusters. It's not a generic Envoy.
I think that's right.
Right. Yeah.
So we're just saying put it in the release notes as a known limitation, and then somebody will fix it when they can.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
I'm going to push on that fix.
Right. I mean, if you had an Envoy crash and like you were using Dubbo, right, and used the Envoy filter to configure it, yes, aggregate filters are more intrinsic feature. Aggregate clusters are more intrinsic feature of Envoy than more extraneous things, but it's still kind of
no argument.
Okay.
Okay, so the decision is a caveat in the release notes about this, and then Guard has fixed for it. Okay, sounds good.
And Peter, I'm going to see if you Chen Dai, who I'm not sure if he's on this call. I'm going to see if he can pick up the fix.
Good work by the release managers to surface these.
Thank you.
Now, obviously, given that the other fix may take a week, if we can get this fixed, all well and good in the timeline, right? As long as it doesn't impact
other things. Yeah.
But we're not going to gate. Okay. Thank you. What should we tackle next? There's a couple of things on standing, or we can go into Nate's topic.
We are still sharing the bug.
Sorry. Are there other 1.8 release items?
So other than these two bugs, the testing, we still need owners. I sent out the email yesterday. There are 6 P0s. We still need owners.
6?
Yeah, 6.
Do you want me to update the verbiage here?
Yes, please. It's from the last week. I forgot to do that. Sorry.
Can you just update it?
I'll do that.
Thanks. Okay. Yeah, so please working group leads, try and find owners. And if we don't get owners, then I guess the TOC members will follow up offline. Okay. Do you want to go to Nate's topic, or we could talk about 1.9 release managers or the telemetry API? Any preferences?
Just one.
The release manager stuff maybe is pretty quick, so maybe we should just get through that. So there are 2 proposed release managers for 1.9. Do I have that right? Jacob and Shamsher.
Oh, sorry, and I didn't add. Also, we had Stephen Landau from Google. That was another nomination.
Okay.
And if we only have 3, then it's a really easy decision. What do you guys think?
Yeah. And those 3 are doing good work already. So
Yeah.
Sounds good to me.
Easy
Great.
call.
Do we have some share on this call? We don't want to assign something without just asking him again.
I've already asked him. He's more than happy to do this.
How do we know
Awesome.
that you've actually asked him and he said yes, Kevin?
I can share the email response where he said, "Yes, please, I want to do this."
Awesome.
I think that sounds like approved to me, right?
Thank you very much.
I'm just going to move that down. Regular business. Nate, do you want to start talking about your thing while I learn how to use Google Docs?
Sure. Yeah, so this was kind of like a journey down the rabbit hole. I started thinking I wanted to promote the locality load balancing label to the API, since it was kind of a hidden label down within Istio. When I started kind of going down that route, I realized API, Istio API, it doesn't actually currently document labels as an API. We do this with annotations, but we don't with labels. So then I started looking at the labels or the annotation stuff and the machinery behind generating the docs for that, and realized, man, we need to give this some love. The annotations are just kind of arbitrarily assigned feature status, and there was like this combination of incorporating the feature status in the name of the annotation itself, which doesn't seem very user friendly going forward once it goes to a different feature status. So I think we've gone. I rolled up some PRs, and I think we've gotten some general consensus around not wanting to embed the feature status in the name of the annotation itself. But then the discussion became, what should the feature status be of all the annotations that we have today? So that's kind of like I think what I'd like to kind of discuss here. So we've got a bunch of annotations in Istio API already. I just by default they're just all alpha, because let's start with baby steps. But I think they're certainly not all alpha, right? So in some of that discussion, it did seem a little arbitrary. Like a lot of the comments were, well, this is probably at least beta, right? But it'd be good to kind of like as a group kind of decide how, like, an approach for how we should like categorize these, say for 1.9, so that we actually have like something we all agree on and a way to kind of assign these feature statuses for annotations and labels going forward.
Yeah, thanks, Nate. I mean, I actually really appreciate you taking the time to go through and put effort into corralling that topic. And yes, there's clearly smear in the API service. That's
It's a very nice word.
Exactly right.
Yeah, I was trying to be judicious. We say so? No. So do we? So one, it seems like they were getting pretty good dialogue going on the PR, where people are taking like reasonable ownership of the status of the things.
Do we think that that's fine? I guess. Like, do we? I mean, ultimately, it comes down to everybody's kind of gut feel for, yeah, this is kind of beta, this is kind of stable. I don't know that everybody's necessarily using the same criteria for doing that. And I think that's a one question I think it was Doug raised was, what exactly is the distinction between the status of a feature and the annotations or labels? Do we have I guess criteria for, I mean, it's technically an API for the feature, right?
Yeah, no, it should be treated like an API, right? So, I mean, I think there are, there's some ways to make these decisions, right? I mean, obviously, if the annotation is basically a stand-in for an API, right, that we would use like at a different level of granularity, like putting an annotation on namespace instead of using sidecar or something like that, and the equivalent feature in sidecar is at beta or in development, then the annotation should be at the same level. Unless the annotation came before the API and we communicated to users that annotation was stable.
Or maybe the annotation wasn't tested as part of the feature.
Right, like, do we know if the annotations are tested?
Yeah.
Yes.
So look, I think it makes sense to be alpha by default, and if there are appropriate tests, it makes sense to be promoted to beta. I don't think it makes sense to be something beta without any test in place.
Yeah, so I was gonna say, why not just follow the same graduation phase that we have for other things? Because these are APIs, right? So
right, I think the issue, right, I agree, but we're not starting from zero.
Exactly.
That's the problem that we have, right? We have to figure out how to recover from our lack of process to this point.
Right, maybe it could be a lightweight process, which the focus would be more on, does it have automated testing that we don't necessarily need to regress to ask, do you have an IFC, do you have a design doc? Because, it's already been done.
Yeah, are there a simple set of questions that if a working group lead answers yes to, then we can accept that feature, that annotation is beta. I think that's right for the existing ones. So yes, is it in widespread use? Is it tested? Is it documented?
Yeah.
If you can answer yes to those three questions, and you can provide some other evidence maybe to reinforce your argument, then there's an argument for making it beta.
Yes, I agree.
Can we jot that down here?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry,
Definitely.
Or maybe we can do a template for that too, and the work group can follow that.
Hopefully, it's a one-time thing. Once we add this, then the new annotations just go by the normal process, right? The interesting question here would be, so I already know there will be annotations which are in widespread use, which are widespread documented, but don't have tests, and there are users relying on it. So the impetus from us should be for 1.9, let's try to add those tests so that we can actually call it beta. Is that correct, Louis?
Sorry, I'm trying to catch up. Say that again, Naresh?
Yeah, I was just saying there are a lot of annotations which I know which will suffice the last two items in your list, but not the first one. So are we going to say for 1.9 that they're still alpha and then, or we're going to add
If they're not
tests and promote?
tested, I don't think they should be marked beta.
I agree.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Like we're not removing them, so we're not going to break people. We're not going to go regress, right?
Yeah.
I think there's a question about not just alpha, right, but also development, right? If you don't answer yes to any of these questions,
absolutely, they're
right,
pre-alpha.
Then shouldn't be in alpha.
Yeah, you should downgrade it to development.
And you better be able to make a really good argument for that to be even in alpha if you're not saying yes to any of those three. And if somebody has other criteria that they think that could help qualify here, please suggest.
So are we suggesting that the only change we would make for any of these annotations that exist today would be just to beta but not stable?
No, this is alpha. So they will be alpha by default. And if they go through the 3 questions, yes to each of them, they could be promoted to beta. If they didn't have any of the questions, we were looking at downgrade them to experimental.
What I'm asking is, so yes, they're all alpha today. This criteria would make them beta. Is there any other criteria that would make them stable?
Got you.
So obviously, if it's, do we have any? Well, right. Leaving aside our issues with CRDs and our ability to make APIs stable using the normal definition, we do have stable APIs.
We have stable features. That's how we classify them in our docs.
I think this time around, just because we're dealing with a relatively small backlog, if a working group lead thinks that a thing should be made stable, they can take it up with the TOC and we can sign off. How about that?
Yep, that's good.
It should be pretty quick to work through.
One last question then with respect to all this stuff. So we have a bunch of annotations now, well, not a bunch, maybe like a handful, that actually start with alpha in the name. So I think we had talked about wanting to change that. So what sort of deprecation and replacement process should we follow here for those?
The renaming?
Yeah.
So I think I'd asked you to track the kind of deprecated by so we could do the swap thing, right? That's pretty normal practice. You know, we're gonna have to leave the existing one in its whatever its determined state is. And if that determined state was beta, right, then we have to follow the process. And probably, frankly, because the cost of migration is low, the deprecation could be for a long time, right? The documentation should update, but there's probably no reason because we now, in theory, have a framework where if the deprecated by was deprecated by another annotation with a cleaned up name, like we could deal with that automatically in a framework. If the deprecation was by an API feature, right, so it got promoted out of an annotation, then it should follow the normal timeline for deprecation. Right, and that should be in the generated documentation where you say deprecated by this, right, and then we track that. Does that sound appropriate to people?
Totally. Like the work you're doing is amazing, Nathan. Like we have been waiting for this for a long time, so I'm glad you took it on. Let's just make sure.
I didn't do it intentionally, just to be fair. This was just because of that locality label thing.
We'll take the benefits. I want to make sure if we do what I'm seeing through that PR is there a lot that I have commented that seem deprecated. Now, if a annotation was alpha and we decided that nobody actually used it, it's totally fine to deprecate it, right? I just want to make sure we clear out the documentation so that people, or we give them a migration path. So that might be increasing your scope a bit, but somebody will have to do a scan of the docs and update.
Yeah, that makes sense. We should probably just have a README in the annotations and labels folders that kind of like describes how like this process effectively. I think that probably makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, thank you so much, Nathan.
Should the same standard apply to environment variables?
Yes, I was going to bring that up. Good call, Mitch.
They're not exactly the same. John Howard pointed out that we tend to think of our environment variables more as alpha level. And John, you can clarify if I've misrepresented there.
I think we said experimental today.
Yeah, I mean, experimental or alpha, one of those, but I can't imagine labeling an environment variable as beta and certainly not stable. That just, that seems odd.
Well, there are some that are stable, right?
Yeah.
Like HTTP proxy, for instance, is a standard, and we use that in white box sidecars.
Yes, you're right. Forgot about that one.
Like as is path user UUID PID ... right? Those are probably stable because they are standards. So
right, yeah, the standards ones. Yeah, I wasn't thinking of those. I was thinking more of the ones like that are used for user customization.
So we have removed some options for certain features that were considered maybe alpha-ish, like workload TTLs, for example. And as far as I know, the only way to configure them now is through environment variables.
Yeah, so that's absolutely true. And I think the fix is not to label those as stable, but it's to move them to proper APIs.
I understand.
So there's a bunch of environment variables that are super useful. Like there's the trace sampling one that Mitch gave as an example. Like these are real things that we need in our API, but the fix isn't to make them the environment variable stable. The fix is to move them to a real API, which for that tracing one, we're doing with the telemetry API. For the secret stuff, there's a bunch of those actually, not just the TTL.
I know.
We need to do something about it, probably mesh config, but we haven't yet. But I think that would be the solution here.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and another key is to kind of communicate what are the ranges of features to our user for environment vars. Because today, I think we just blindly mark that whole environment vars as a pre-alpha in our Istio.io. So it's really based on what you know to use them.
But that's a design. I mean, the design for environment variables was always that they are not meant as an API. They are meant as, short term. They will go away next release. Don't use them except for escape hatches.
But I think Louis just mentioned paths and HTTP paths will, because they are standards, so they will always be there. Is that not true?
How do you know what environment you are going to run? I mean, who knows where you are going to run Istio and if that will be on Windows or I don't know.
Right, but I mean, like, they are effective standards, Gustin, right? When we run in environments that respect those standards, that's how they behave.
True, but how do you pass the environment variables to something? I mean, if you have a multi-tenant Istio, what is the sense of it?
Right, so in general, I agree with the recommendation, which is, like, if you ever want to have an environment variable be beta or better,
you're doing it wrong.
You're probably doing it wrong, and you should think long and hard about what you're doing. It may happen, right? So we should,
for agent, yes. For agent, probably.
Right. So
maybe
no matter what, we should probably codify them using the same mechanisms, but we should prevent them from progressing.
I think mesh config is a bigger problem because mesh config is, like environment variables, but it is a bit more API-like.
Right, and the obvious issue we have with, right, so now we have a really good mechanism, based on what Nate and what Mitch are doing, to, at a very fine level of granularity, capture features, status of features at almost like a field level, but we don't have the ability to do that on the field level in APIs. Right, and that's really problematic in mesh config, right? Because mesh config is the thing where each individual field is a feature, more or less.
I mean, I think the same thing that applies for environment variable applies for mesh config. If you put something in mesh config, which is a global that has pretty big impact, not in a proper API, you are probably doing it wrong. And we should never progress mesh config as a beta API. There are all kind of implications of how mesh config works that prevents multi-tenant, prevents safe rollout of configs.
Right. This is all, yeah. Like it becomes a very nuanced and detailed conversation. I think what I'm saying right now is we don't have the tracking ability, and we don't have and we can't even produce the doc. Like what Nate just did for annotations actually lets us produce good doc. Right, and we can go work on the docs tooling, so we can help set users' expectations. We need to be able to do the same thing for API.
Yeah, we just use that same annotation or whatever comment thing on fields and protos that we're putting on the annotations.
So we can't use exactly the same because it creates a circular reference between our repositories, but we can duplicate it in the package repository, and that's fine. My question is, I've dropped the link to where we document environment variables per command on Istio.io. There are, I believe, 163 that we document. Where are we documenting that these are alpha or pre-alpha today? Where are we letting users know that these are not safe?
I think the answer is we don't.
Right.
No, Lynn added it on the doc. I'll find
Lynn added it at the top or somewhere, yes. Lynn, I mean, command line parameters are also, I think, are still documented for Istio and other things, which again, we never supported as an API. And we should make it clear that they're not, I don't know even why we are documenting them, since nobody can set them.
Well,
except
there is a distinction, right, between things that are, literally in development and things that are in release that users do use in environment variables. So we still need some graduation, even if we want to use a different set of terms, which is totally fine, right? I don't that much.
Internal use, let's call it internal use. I mean, there are a lot of command line flags and environment, because the API is mesh config. I mean, they get set from mesh config or from values.yaml, which is exposed to the user, but users does not need to know that something in mesh config gets translated into some environment variable or some command line parameter for internal use.
Okay, so it sounds like we're in agreement that we have to have basically the directory of environment variables, right? Because we need that to produce the doc, right?
Yep. With clear indication that it's experimental and should not be used except for exceptions.
Well, internal things shouldn't be even presented.
Agreed.
Right? So they should not be generated doc, even if they are in the directory. And only the things that we would ever consider exposing to a user would go in that list.
That's a good point.
That's a great point. Yeah,
excellent
today
point.
We don't have a way to separate them, so it's just automatically generated. It's too much for a user.
How about we put an internal? I mean, right now we discuss only experimental alpha, but let's put an internal and both environment variables, even annotations and definitely command line flags and other things that are not supposed to be used by user. They're internal, so that's a completely different category.
You mean to hide it from the docs?
Hide it from the doc, or yeah.
Got it. So Louis, I see that the command line args are right now documented. I feel like they shouldn't be even documented.
I agree. I keep asking for each release. I ask for them to be removed, but someone likes them.
Well, let's clarify, right? Is there a reason to keep them there?
So we support today the operator overlays at install time, which do have the ability to set from the operator or from Istio install any of these environment variables or command line flags, as I understand it.
Is this a beta API or something? I mean, again, it's I don't know who decided that those things become API in the first place.
That would be the environments working group, Costin.
I'm pretty sure I would never have agreed to have environments, to have command line flags.
Let's not dwell on how we ended up here. Let's think about what we want to do going forward, right? So, is low-level command line arguments helpful for end users? Are they actually useful, right? That's the question we need to ask.
There is no supported way to set them, and they're not tested. They don't fit any criteria for.
So the operator overlay is definitely supported, Costin. It's a feature.
Show me a test. Show me a test. Show me a test that is changing any environment variable in the operator overlay, and it's checking that it works.
Sure, it's under the pilot integration tests. It's analysistest.go.
That's an environment variable, not a command line argument. But I mean, the command line arguments are very small in number. Like they're almost all about logging, basically. And there's no other way to configure them. So.
No. For Istio, it's through environment variables, no?
Logging?
Sorry, no. Through the values.yaml.
Oh yeah.
We don't tell people to go to modify Istio the command line in a template.
Oh yeah, no one directly. Yes.
That's what I'm saying.
What we're trying. Yeah, I agree with Costin here. So we have alternatives mesh here, where either we masquerade it as a mesh config API or some other high-level API, where eventually they get distilled down as command line args. Because if you're using a operator or Istio CTL to manage your Istio installation, if you manipulate them directly, they'll get lost anyways, right?
And we also want to support Helm, which doesn't really support editing command line arguments, and Customize, which doesn't support it, and there are all kind of other environments where it's not. I mean, the operator is kind of the one-off where we added a feature just for the sake of.
I 100% agree with Costin on where we should get to in the project, that we should not be asking users to modify these. I'm a little bit concerned about disabling documentation because I do think that users are, in fact, modifying them today.
I mean, that's worrisome if they do, because it's probably going to break.
Can we try and get some signal on that?
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm trying to keep up with the notes because this is a lot.
Can we find out what operator configs people are using, or?
So the UX working group started a conversation with the steering committee back in July about automatically collecting some data about Istio installations in an opt-out fashion. I think the conversation just died silent, so I can try to revive that.
How about we deprecate the things that allows to set and see if anyone complains? Because we need to support Helm. Helm definitely doesn't have this capability. I don't want to have disparity between Helm and operator, because there is no value for users to be confused, and so simpler is better.
Martin is the expert on this area as far as I'm aware, but I can say for sure that Costin, we at Google are using the overlay extensively for our products.
Sure, but you can fix it. It's not.
I think we are talking about making this like an internal API, just like there are some internal environment variables, and start the process of saying it in our docs that we'll be deprecating it.
Yep.
Going forward, and here is how you migrate and use a higher level API, right?
I mean, if vendors want to use an internal thing, that's their responsibility, and they have to keep up with release. Right?
Exactly right.
Vendors, only have so much pity for them.
I know for a fact that one of the few of the recent cleanups removed a bunch of command line. I mean, trust domain and some of them quite critical. They were removed. So if someone is setting trust domain as a command line flag, probably they are not getting what they expect. And that's fine. I mean, it was reviewed as a code change and as a cleanup, and nobody treated it as an API because it's.
So I guess a question here, right? So do we want to do the canonicalization process for args, just like we said we want to do it for annotations, labels, and API fields? If so, we need an owner, and then we need the working group leads to review them. Now, maybe we could just do that, right, without doing all the other machinery things that we've started to do for things that we do want to support as API long term.
So, Louis, for ours, my goal was to completely get rid of them and use environment variables everywhere, because the complexity of operator, which cannot map up to Helm and other install mechanism, was due to the command line parameters. The fact that you cannot, use customize, for example, to change command line parameters.
If you want to say that, like, args are simply a verification of environment variables, and environment variables is the canonical API for args.
Yep. And args are gone from Istio and everything else. So everything is environment variable. I think there is a, there is precedence for using environment variables consistently for configurations, for internal configurations, and we have the API.
So for the discussion here, could we just like assign an owner to that topic and to drive that discussion?
So Mitch, you picked up environment variables. Nate, you picked up annotations. Who wants to pick up args?
If it's about getting rid of them, I can pick them up. I mean,
well, the first thing is to just get the list of all of them and get them reviewed. Right.
The list is on Istio. I mean, we do have it already.
Yeah, I'm happy to add the infrastructure for us to track status level of command line args. It'd be pretty trivial to do. As far as defining which ones have which support levels, that sort of thing, that should not be me.
No. The proposal is to just get rid of them completely. I mean, deprecate all of them and use environment variables and one way to configure
That's
stuff
the two parts, right? That's the second part, Costin. The first part is to do what Mitch said, right? So if Mitch is willing to do basically put together a PR, which the working group leads can review, which is here's the list of all the command line args. That looks a bit like the thing that Nathan had. Mitch's job is not to assess what the support level is. He's just providing a framework for people to do that review. That would be super helpful. And then we can do the next thing, right? So there are two parts there. So Mitch, you don't mind doing that? The first part?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so
one last tiny topic related to all this. Just looking at our Istio.io page for feature status, we only list the three. We list alpha, beta, and stable. We don't list a pre-alpha. So it'd be good to get some sort of get that updated to include that whatever we want to call pre-alpha. Is it
experimental?
Experimental.
We used the experimental is what we used in the past.
That's fine, but we should just standardize that.
Yeah, we should. I put a note in suggested terminology. Feel free to comment there, folks.
But that's not exactly feature status, though, is it? Right?
It's not, but we should. And they're kind of the same, right? Like we shouldn't be documenting, even API fields, right, that are in that internal or development state. So it's not clear that we need to have divergent terminology.
Okay, so pre-alpha or experimental would not actually show up on our docs anywhere. They might actually be in the repository, but they'd be marked hidden.
Yep.
Yeah. So currently we use hide from docs as the way of doing this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which isn't great because we're not like that mechanism doesn't let us convey status right to people,
right?
Other than it's there or not there. So the last one is who wants to pick this up for APIs?
I do think, Louis, that for experimental APIs, even if we hide them, we can have tasks and guides which say, hey, this is how you use an experimental thing, and we can clearly indicate that this feature is in development, right?
Yeah, but we don't want to put it in reference material, right?
Yeah, I agree.
Could we have a setting on the site or a separate site or put them on wiki or some other place so the documentation in Istio is clean and it's only the things that are supported and beta and stable, and then if you want to do experimental or internal stuff, you go to the developer site or some other.
Well, I mean, like even that, right? I mean, today the analyzers don't have a canonical form of knowing, right, the feature status of API use, so they have to go and codify this by other means.
Yeah, that's clear. But
so like this would be hugely beneficial, right? Having that mechanism be standardized and actually be usable within a framework, right? Because we literally have an analyze, right, which tells you you're using an unsupported feature.
Well, and more than unsupported, we'd like to build an analyzer that can give you an idea of your support that you're leveraging. So you're saying, here's all the alpha features you're using, here's all the beta features you're using. We pivot our support and our guarantees a lot on these feature statuses, but as a user, understanding what your actual exposure to them is pretty much impossible. The surface is just too wide.
Just use only beta APIs and don't look at anything else.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's, some users would like to be in that state, and they would like to know if they were in that state. Right? I mean, this would probably help us with some of our upgrade pain, and it would also let us make an assessment of, like, do we have too much API surface? Where do we start shaving, right? And how do we shave? Because if you can go to a customer and say, run this tool, right, and let us know, right, the feature status for every feature that you're using, right? That's really important UX feedback when we plan deprecations. Right? Right. There's a huge UX benefit to being able to work this into the toolchain. Thanks, Doug. Doug, can you capture that in the note, by the way? So coming back to the earlier topic, we need an owner for APIs, and that's probably a bigger work item than the other three, because it involves going through. Well, it's going to involve forcing people to go through all the protos and annotate every field, and annotate every enum value.
And also check if which state they should be in.
Yeah, no, that's like, I don't expect the person who creates the framework to do this. I expect them to put the thumb screws to the working group leads to get this done.
We also will need to differentiate between the API name in Kubernetes, which often is v1 alpha 1 or v1 beta 1, and the support of the individual proto fields. That can be confusing for our users.
We are already there.
I know. I'm simply saying we need to make a clear statement on it. Not that I don't think it's something that we can fix. We just need to make sure it's intelligible to our users.
Yeah. I think, Louis, working group leads owning this, because this, I think one person owning will be very difficult to put across.
I'm just talking about one person owning getting the framework working.
Yeah, I have someone in mind who's taken a swing at this before, but I haven't asked their permission yet. So Louis, I can follow up if we're not getting an owner here.
Okay, so I'll take an action item with you, Mitch, and maybe if there's some other TOC member.
I can help. I mean, I've tried. I've been doing it internally for us, anyways.
All right, I remember now.
Guys, real quick, to circle back to my earlier question. So my question was, do I have approval from the TOC to go back to the feature status page and to add an experimental column?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I think Jacob was asking what terminology we should use. We'll be using experimental, pre-alpha, and development, which they're the same thing.
Right.
I reluctantly say this, that yeah, you should clarify, because we release yeah, we are in a state where we have experimental features and they're not explained well, so your clarification will help. But I want to go to a state where we don't have those. We straight away go to alpha. I've not seen a lot of other mature infrastructure products have a pre-alpha stage, to be honest.
It's still useful even if we don't document them, like to actually, like if we store, like for annotations, for example, if we create a new annotation but it's experimental, we put it in the API repository, we mark it hidden from docs, but it still has, like in the Go code, that its feature status is experimental or something like that. I think that's still a useful signal.
You know, someone used to say more wood, fewer arrows. I mean, let's focus on the beta and stable features and maybe alpha features, and you know, 6 months from now we can worry about the internal ones if we find a need.
So Jake, I mean, how to do the kind of UI treatment for this? Jacob, did you volunteer to help figure out how we might present this information? Right, there are ways of making experimental features be kind of visually below the fold, so we don't encourage people to use them. Right, we should think about that.
Yeah, actually, no, what I was suggesting is we have things like tracing or whatever that are marked experimental, and then we have other pages that are marked pre-alpha. And so I think to end users, it's just not clear to them, like, how's experimental different from pre-alpha? What does that even mean? So I can help with that initiative. And as far as helping below the fold, I mean, I'm also willing to help people kind of coordinate that effort as well.
Yeah, I think that would be really helpful because I think it's an important part of this, but maybe somewhat orthogonal to the more frameworky aspects of this work. Who wants to take ownership of the terminology? Do you want the TOC? Should the TOC just go and do that?
I think that seems like a TOC thing to me. Yeah.
Okay. Who else would like to be involved? So Jacob, you volunteered. I've heard opinions from Mitch, Nate, and Costin on this call about this. So I'm going to consider them de facto involved. Anyone else?
Is this selection of the various terms, or is it broader than that? Like,
go ahead, Neeraj.
We are talking about 4 terms here, right? Is that what you're discussing, or is this even broader?
I think we're talking about 4 essential terms,
okay,
and how they're described to users.
Okay, that's fair.
And we're maintaining the existing terms, or are we thinking about revamping the entire way we refer to these things, like data table?
I would rather not churn users.
I'm just concerned about, like, earlier you referenced me to what you had written there with internal, exposed, and standard. I wasn't sure if you were suggesting replacing what we have documented today with alpha, beta, stable, with that.
I would rather not. Let me complete the notes here, actually, right, which is follow APIs. Document better. How about that?
Looks good to me.
And there is the third thing, that there are some things that are not supposed to be user-facing. They're runtime only. TLS, state or mode or whatever it is, right, which was used by automatic TLS, is never a user-facing feature, but it is an annotation. So we need a nomenclature for that. Right, some things that are runtime only.
Yeah, they're like the status fields of CRDs, right? You're talking about equivalency there for annotations.
Yeah, so these two. Okay. Whatever we like, I don't think we have runtime environment variables. We try really hard not to have runtime API, except for status, which is meta anyway. Annotations is the exception here, I think. But are there other?
We do have runtime environment.
I need to drop. Can you guys stop the recording when you're done?
Yeah, too.
Right, Louis, we do have runtime environment.
Yeah, you're right. We do have
document
variables.
One tiny comment. I don't know if people are. I mean, we had a discussion about having a environment variables normally are require restart, and we had a discussion about having a section in mesh config with and proxy config with having the environment variables and actually making them dynamic. It's for your info. It's something that we'll probably do.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, we could obviously start adding other fields to indicate dynamism. right? But this is still kind of a basic status thing.
Few of them will have to be static, but the rest, probably most of them, we want them eventually to become dynamic.
Yeah, sure. I mean, just like if we were moving environment variables into mesh config, right?
Yep.
Okay. We are out of time. We've covered a lot of ground, but I think we covered some pretty important topics.
One more thing, risk level. I mean, for example, switching to strict mode or something like that is super risky. We should probably also have a kind of a dial of how risky it is to change something. No, seriously, I'm not joking this time.
No, I take your point. Like, I mean, we already added deprecated by, hidden from docs, right? We can add other dimensions.
Dangerous.
I mean, there's a description field for a lot of these things too. So I mean, you could express that pretty easily there.
Well, I think if we want tooling,
yeah,
this up like analyzers, they need like some kind of standardized definition. So Mitch, I'm gonna put something an AI for you and Ed to think through how tooling and UX would benefit from this, and maybe come back with some proposal. I don't know.
Will do.
And let that drive the fields that we need to add.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Louis, I think what Nathan, you have a PR out. Let's make sure we just discuss the runtime field nomenclature there, so we don't have to have another document for it. And maybe what Jacob's PR will do when he adds it, TOC can jump on that PR to figure out how we want to convey the messaging for pre-alpha, alpha, beta, and stable. Is that?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah, sounds good. Okay, so before I let everybody go, I want to say, we are trying to promote external control plane to alpha for 1.8. So we already have work group group lead approval from environment work group. So I'm seeking TOC approval for that. Please take a look and mark your approval in the issue.
While we're doing plugs, I received a grand total of 0 comments on the telemetry API proposal in the last week. So if others would like to comment, the weeks are going by.
That's for 1.9, right?
The implementation is for 1.9. The goal was to get it finalized design-wise for 1.8.
Got you. You do.
Hey, Len, I'm just curious. So that promotion document, the document has been, you all have been working for a while, and now you just want the final nod, or do we have to go and look at all the underneath pieces for promotion? Like, is all the groundwork done and you just need the final stamp?
Pretty much, yeah. You know how thorough Frank and Nate does review, so it's like 100 comments to get a documentation page added.
But it looked marvelous.
Well, thank you for all the help.
Okay, awesome. I'll take a look at your plan then. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Niraj.
But by the way, Lynn, don't feel bad. I don't know if you saw what I went through with the multi-cluster docs. So.
Oh, yeah. Understood.
That was yours at least times 4.
Yeah, I think we covered a lot of good ground, but I also need to drop. So, bye.
I think we basically done here, Louis.
Yeah, I'm just trying to keep up with notes, guys. So yeah, feel free to drop off. There's a lot to.
You like the scribe role?
No, I don't. Okay, I will stop the recording. Actually,
All right. Thanks, folks. Bye.
Yeah, thanks.
Bye.